What's up, guys? It's Parnellyx, and I just woke up from a short 6-month nap to post another Warwick video. I recently hit Challenger with Warwick mid lane, although I did play plenty of jungle and top along the way. I was primarily playing mid. Now, this build I want to break down is something that I haven't really seen other Warwick players go as much, and I think that it's pretty strong in all three roles: mid, top, and jungle. Primarily because this build makes you scale like an absolute beast. What do I call the build? Overlord's Blood Trail. I call it this because, well, you're a Warwick main, you're smart, you'll pick up on it. In addition to the really strong scaling that you're going to get, you're also going to spike really hard at one item, and overall you're going to be really tanky, super beefy, and you're going to have a lot of raw damage to complement that. Before diving into the build itself, I want to mention that the summoner spells we're going to be rolling with are Flash and Barrier in lane or Flash and Smite in the jungle, and runes we're going to be going with Grasp the Undying, Demolish, Second Wind, Revitalize, Last Stands, Presence of Minds with Attack Speed Shard, Scaling Health Shard, and Flat Health Shard in lane. And in the jungle, we're going to be going Press the Attack, Triumph, Legend Haste I actually prefer over the other ones, Last Stands, Eyeball Collection, Treasure Hunter, and then Attack Speed Shard, Adaptive Force Shard, Scaling Health Shard. So to start off, we're going to go either Doran's Blade or Doran's Shield in lane, or Green Jungle Pet in the jungle. D-Blade is what I like to go in scrappy melee matchups where I want to maximize my early game kill power to bully champions out of lane and snowball out of control. If I want to beat the shit out of a good matchup, this is what I'm going to run. So it's going to be something that I start against the likes of Sylas, Akali, or Talon in the mid lane, or Camille, Darius, or Jackson top lane. Although if I'm playing versus a burst melee champion like Sylas or Akali and they take Ignite and Electrocute, something that just signals that they're trying to kill me a lot in the early game, then I'll just actually switch over to Doran's Shield in order to deny their early kill power a bit. I'll also go Doran's Shield versus ranged champions like Akshan, Tristana, Corki, Talia, Orianna, Teemo, etc. As when combined with Second Wind in your passive, you'll be able to sustain through majority of lane harass in the game. For example, when I'm versus Azir, and this is assuming I'm even, I will pretty much be like 20% HP the entire laning phase, but he won't actually have any kill threat on me, as I just am simply going to heal too much through his harass off of both those things. The only thing that I'll need to worry about in these situations is jungle ganks, my own greed, and just falling behind. As if the Azir does get an early kill, then that would change the dynamic a bit. Versus most ranged ADCs in particular, like Corki, Vayne, and Varus, you aren't actually going to be able to sustain through their poke damage early game, since ADCs are just broken the first couple levels. So you're going to have to play lane more passive and patient and normal by giving up CS and avoiding heavy harass, letting the wave push to you, etc. And I'm going into a little bit too much detail, but starting items, they're important. On your first recall, you're going to aim for a Tiamat if you can. If you can't afford Tiamat, then just take as many longswords as you can. In general, we're going to be trying to rush Tiamat as fast as possible, unless we're stomping our lane early on, say like we pick up like 2 kills in the first couple minutes, and we want to try to freeze versus our opponents, then we're going to hold off on the Tiamat and just build longswords and ruby crystals. But in general, building the Tiamat first is going to be the way to go. After that, if you're jungling, you're going to be prioritizing longswords on your build path towards Titanic Hydra. If you are in lane, you're usually going to be prioritizing the ruby crystals because the extra health is going to make you just a lot more safe. Usually you're not going to need the extra damage, you need that extra safety after you have that Tiamat. First big item, it's going to be Titanic Hydra. This item is golden for you. It gives you tons of damage, tons of wave clear, gives you poke, burst, DPS, literally just everything that you would ever want in a Warwick item, Titanic Hydra gives. And it's going to be the core Hydra of this item build. I never swap it out. When I'm going this build, at least, I'm never swapping it out for the likes of like Stridebreaker, for example. I'm always going Titanic, especially in the mid lane. If you're going top or jungle, maybe you can be more versatile, but in the mid lane, and if you're just going this build, you're playing for scaling, you really want Titanic Hydra for the item synergy that you're going to build down the road. Next up, we're gonna buy boots. I usually never buy my boots before my Titanic Hydra because I really love that power spike so much. Maybe I'll go boots 1. In very specific matchups, I'll go boots 2. But usually I wait until Titanic Hydra is finished, and I'll go one of 4 different options. There's Boots of Swiftness, Ionian Boots, Plated Steel Caps, and Mercury Treads. Now, Boots of Swiftness is my default option. It's the cheapest boot option while also giving you the most movement speed. And Warwick's a champion that lacks base movement speed, so this helps out quite a lot. And you're going to get plenty of stats across the board with this build. So I actually think that Boots of Swiftness just helps you get cheap movement speed and then move on to your other items. If you're going against a lot of CC, obviously Merc Treads is great. Keep in mind, Merc Treads or Tenacity does not work against knockups or displacements. It only works against stuns, roots, and stuff like that. So just keep that in mind. Plated Steel Caps is good if you're playing against heavy AD team, especially if they're auto attack based. And then Ionian Boots is something I flex to if I'm playing versus a team that has a lot of like divers or assassins that are going after me. Say like, the extra movement speed from Boots of Swiftness doesn't really matter if people are just fighting me. Then the extra CDR might help out. The next item we're building is going to be Overlord's Bloodmail, which is where this build gets its namesake. This is an item that I never really see Warwick players go, and I just feel is very underrated. I'm not saying it's the only good Warwick build out there. There's plenty of good options, but I genuinely really like this build because I feel like it just gives you really good damage and really good tankiness. You get the best of both worlds here. You lack some CDR early on, but then you make up for it a little bit later on in the game. And the raw stats is great. Now, the thing about Overlord's Blood Trail that I think gets misconstrued among Warwick players is they think of it, they try to compare it versus other tanky options. Warwick is a champion that prefers resist more than he prefers health, just because of how his lifesteal works. However, I don't think that you should be really thinking of this item as a tank item. You should be thinking of it as a damage item, because you get about 70 AD upon completion, and that's assuming you're 100% HP once you buy this item. That only scales further down the line and when you're lower on health. Warwick is a champion that's low HP all the time, so you're going to benefit quite a bit from that passive. Just generally just means in team fights, you're going to have like 100 bonus AD from this, which is crazy. That is more than Eclipse. Now, this item, of course, is more expensive than Eclipse by a decent margin, but you're also getting like 500 health on top of that. So yeah, it's pretty damn good. And the build path isn't that bad. You just build the same item over and over again. There's not really much instruction I can give on your preference here. It's just whatever you feel you need more, health versus damage, just depending on the game state. But I think this item, it feels good when you buy it, and then it just feels better and better as time goes on. In addition to that, it also synergizes quite well with Titanic Hydra, which also converts maximum health to attack damage. After you finish your core items, your build is going to open up substantially, and there's a lot of options that you can go with depending on the situation. However, there is a general framework, or I guess there's just default items that I tend to build in the 4th, 5th, and 6th slot that I want to cover first before we talk about all of the options there. So 4th item typically is going to be Iceborne Gauntlets. I like Iceborne because it gives you some armor. You're lacking resist at this point. That's good. Some health is great as well. And it also helps give you some CDR, which is a stat that you're lacking at this point, along with some upfront burst with the Sheen proc, which just helps you get targets below half health a lot easier. But most importantly, with Iceborne Gauntlets, it's going to give you reliable, consistent sticking power. This is crucial at this point in the game because you are a pure stat stick champion. You have a ton of raw AD and base HP. You just need to be able to stick onto your opponents in order to kill them, especially when you're diving carries in fights like ADCs and mages. And this is going to help you do exactly that. Even if I'm playing against a more AP focused team, I will still get Iceborne Gauntlet sometimes for the offensive purposes that it provides. I love this item. It helps complete your build overall. Not to mention, it's also a very cheap power spike. Once you're at this stage of the game where you've built this item, you're going to feel like you've truly scaled, and you're only going to continue to scale. The next item that I typically build after Iceborne is I need some MR, so we're going to go with, drumroll please, Spirit Visage. It's a very common default item. There's nothing wrong with it. You know, Warwick, he heals a lot. You get extra healing with it. It's great. It gives you CDR, health, MR. Nothing much to it. There's other MR options that I'll cover, but when in doubt, Spirit Visage it out. Last item is typically actually going to be Parnellyx Gauge for me. Not only because it just gives you more attack damage and health, which synergizes really well with your build. It gives you some tenacity, which you might be lacking at this point, but the shield late game on it is bonkers. You're building a ton of health with this build, and even though you're not going to have a ton of resist at this point comparatively to like other tanks, that shield is going to pretty much give you like 3 seconds of complete invulnerability in fights, which will help stall for another E cast, another Q cast, and that just essentially means a lot of times you're just too damn hard to take down. So Parnellyx Gauge typically going to be my last item here. Now I will flip the items around at some points. Sometimes I go Parnellyx Gauge 4th item, sometimes Spirit Visage 4th item, sometimes I go Visage last, Iceborne last, etc. But these are like my most default items, and it's typically in this order. Now regarding item 4 through 6 replacements, I'm only going to cover items that I have really built before. I'm not going to talk about every single theoretical situation. Items like Blade of the Rune King, you could technically go if you need more attack damage, for example, but I can't recall really building it with this item build, and there's just other instances that are similar. One of my most common item replacements is going to be Jackshow in place of Parnellyx Gauge, or it really can be alongside Parnellyx Gauge as well. Just an item that'll give you a lot of resist on both sides. It'll allow you to stay in fights a lot longer. This is something that I like to replace Parnellyx if the enemy team is not building a lot of resist, or if they have a lot of percent health. It's also like a good way to like build MR without building really an MR item. For example, say you're playing against a team that has 480 champions and they have like a little bit of MR, and you just feel like you need a little bit of MR, you can go Jackshow, which kind of covers your bases there. But typically, this is going to be an item that you build later on in the game, 5th or 6th. Another item that I'll build a lot, either alongside Iceborne versus heavy AD teams or as a replacement to Iceborne, is going to be Randuin's Omen if I'm playing versus a lot of crit champions, or if I just want more team-wide utility with the AoE slow versus more selfish utility with the Iceborne slow. Black Cleaver can be good if your team is heavy AD and you just need more armor shred with your team. Synergizes really well with Titanic, as you can easily shred the entire enemy team. If you need anti-heal, Executioners is great for a similar reason. The synergies with Titanic Hydra, you're just able to get reliable, consistent AoE anti-heal versus the entire enemy team. If I want targeted anti-heal, I typically am going to prefer Executioners to Bramble Vest, because Bramble Vest requires the enemy to actually attack you. However, you can go Bramble Vest into Thornmail as well, of course, really good. Gives you a lot of damage alongside a lot of armor. Canik Rookern is it's a decent MR item. It's just going to give you really just a lot of like anti-burst power. So if you just feel like you need MR versus very bursty magic damage champions, Canik Rookern can help deal with that. Unending Despair is essentially a armor version of Spirit Visage. You're just going to get a lot of healing over the course of a fight and just some armor, CDR, and health. So if you want Spirit Visage, but there's not really much MR on the enemy team, then you can go Unending Despair. I really like this item if you get super far ahead. Abyssal Mask is going to be a super cheap MR item. I like this if I need magic resist, and my team has a lot of magic damage as well. I also think it's getting buffed soon, which might make this a much higher priority item, maybe even in place of Spirit Visage, but we'll see. And then my last item that I'm going to just throw in this list is going to be Serpent's Fang. You don't really care for the stats so much of Serpent's Fang. It has a lot of lethality, which Warwick doesn't really like. However, if you're playing against a team with heavy shields, you're playing against like a Sona, Seraphine, stuff of that nature, and they've scaled, Serpent's Fang at some points is actually like a must-have item, at least for someone on your team. And like I said with Executioners, you can apply it to essentially everyone in the enemy team, which makes it great against these comps in a very situational basis. But that's it for my Season 14 item guide. I would like to do a more thorough item guide at some point, but really I've been kind of just doing this build. So I just wanted to tell you guys what I've been doing, but we'll see what happens. Thanks so much guys for supporting me and my channel, even through my hiatus. And also let me know if you have any questions in the comments, opinions. I'm always open to hearing you guys out and just answering anything I can. Peace out. Have a great one. Bless you.